Back in the mid-90s, Oldsmobile rolled out its brand new flagship, the Aurora luxury sports sedan. Designed to replace the Toronado coupe, as well as the Oldsmobile Regency, it used V8 and eventually V6 engines, riding on a platform shared with the Buick Riviera. In today's episode, we're going to look at how the Aurora was GM's last effort to save the Oldsmobile brand, and how it almost worked. So pour up a glass of orange juice, kick back, and let's get down to the nitty-gritty. It all began in the late 1980s with a concept car known as the Oldsmobile Tube Car, styled by Bud Chandler. The Tube Car hinted heavily at what design language the brand would later adopt for its upcoming flagship sedan. If we place the concept car next to an actual production Aurora, we can definitely see the similarities. But of course, with most cars transitioning from concept to production, the overall car gets toned down and becomes more civilized and cost-effective to produce. Speaking of similarities, full-width tail lamps, wraparound glass, frameless doors, and even the overall silhouette carry over from the concept and eventually found its way on the production model. The actual production design was approved in summer 1989. Initially, the Aurora was intended to enter production in 1992. So if things had gone as planned, that means we would have seen an Aurora model year as early as 1993. But in reality, the car didn't enter production until January 24th, 1994, with 1995 being its initial model year. The Aurora was created to be a halo car for Oldsmobile, and looking at it, it shared no family resemblance with any other car in the lineup at the time, which was by design. And contrary to popular opinion, the Aurora was indeed classified a full-size sedan. The Aurora was positioned upmarket and sort of kept itself isolated from the brand identity altogether. For instance, it did not wear a rocket badge, which was Oldsmobile's official logo at that particular time. Instead, the Aurora got its very own unique swirled A logo. In fact, looking at the exterior, there was no indication of the Aurora being an Oldsmobile in the first place. Really, the only indicators to its relation with the Oldsmobile brand were found on the engine cover and in fine print on the audio system. The Aurora's unique badging also gave a sneak peek at the upcoming redesigned 1997 logo, the logo that the brand would end up using on all of its future products. So what was the logic behind the Aurora? Well, the Oldsmobile brand wanted to entice a new type of buyer, the type of buyer that perhaps would not have otherwise considered driving an Oldsmobile. At the time, the core buyer of a typical Oldsmobile were seniors in their 50s and 60s. Not that the brand had anything against seniors in their 50s and 60s, it's just the fact they wanted to target a new demographic and bring them along for the ride as well, a younger buyer, one in his or her mid to late 40s. Oldsmobile even observed its competitors for branding inspiration. For example, Infiniti was created by Nissan, however was sold as a premium brand with separate dealer networks and very little ties to its parent company. While the Aurora was sold through Oldsmobile dealers, the brand still wanted to distinguish it as a premium model that broke the stereotypical Oldsmobile image. The brand aspired for the car to be cross-shot with premium flagship models, such as the Infiniti Q45 and the Lexus LS400. And just like those full-size flagship models, the first generation Aurora came standard with a V8. Oldsmobile's 4-liter dual overhead cam V8 was based on Cadillac's 4.6-liter Northstar V8, which was exclusive to Cadillac before the debut of the Aurora. The L47 cranked out 250 horsepower and was mated to a 4-speed automatic transmission, with driver-selectable normal and power shift modes. A load of tech and creature comforts were selling points for the Aurora, with the interior featuring a driver-centric cockpit layout, a feature that hinted at the sedan's sporting intentions. The controls, along with the ones in the center stack, were oriented towards the driver, and ergonomic research went into the positioning of the gear selector. There was a laundry list of standard items: a dimensional audio system, solar control glass, magnetic variable ratio power steering, and dual front airbags, to name a few. Dual-zone automatic climate control, although mainstream by today's standards, was another standard feature, one that was rather uncommon in 1995. For its first model year, 1995, roughly 46,000 Auroras were sold. But perhaps it was the lofty base price of $34,000 that constrained 1996 model year sales. Now, if we factor in inflation, we'll see that $34,000 in 1995 money equals out to roughly $62,700 in today's money. The Aurora commanded a price significantly lower than that of the full-size Q45 and LS400, as well as the mid-size Mercedes-Benz E320, which started around $43,500 at the time. However, it was still quite a bit pricier than a few other premium mid-size offerings, such as the Lexus ES300's $31,000 and the Acura TL's $29,000 base price. In its second year of production, 1996, Oldsmobile sold 23,651 fewer Auroras than it did in 1995, bringing the total number of sales down to 22,349 units. By the time 1999 rolled around, which was the first generation's last model year, just 18,729 Auroras were sold. It was at this time when Oldsmobile decided to go back to the drawing board. But despite all this, it was the design language of the Aurora that influenced Oldsmobile's future sedans, such as the Alero and the Intrigue. A new concept car debuted in 1995. This time, it was called the Antares. The overall design of this new concept fully adopted the Aurora's new design language, and it was because of this 1995 concept that led to the eventual production of the Intrigue midsize sedan, which came out in 1997 as a 1998 model. Much of the overall design found its way onto the production model. Then, in 1997, we got our first peep at what would eventually become the Alero with the Alero Alpha concept car. Being a V6 powered sport coupe, it was undeniably inspired by the earlier tube car concept, the Antares, not to mention the production Aurora itself. Many of the design cues carry over from concept to production, going on sale in 1998 as a 1999 model. So, while the Aurora's main objective was to attract luxury import buyers, its secondary objective was to bring in younger buyers of all incomes into Oldsmobile dealerships. Those who didn't necessarily have the means for an Aurora or didn't necessarily want a large sedan could still pull off the lot in a smaller and just as sporty Intrigue or Alero. The second generation model, designed by Dennis Burke, went on sale for the 2001 model year. So if you've been following along, you notice there was no 2000 model year Aurora. However, to make up for that, the second generation Aurora went into production in November 1999, before going on sale in February 2000 as a 2001 model. So technically, although there was no 2000 model year Aurora, it was only on a hiatus for just a single month. But before the second generation Aurora went into production, Oldsmobile had envisioned a different path for the car. The idea was to push the Aurora even further upmarket, keeping an 8-cylinder as the only engine option and sharing its platform with the new Buick Riviera, in the same fashion the first generation Aurora had done. Ultimately, pushing the Aurora further upmarket would have created a void in the lineup for yet another sedan. This new sedan would have served as a replacement model for the discontinued 88 and would have been positioned above the Alero and the Intrigue. This new sedan would have also borrowed the name from that 1995 concept, Antares. These plans, however, did not come to fruition. To make matters worse, sales of two-door coupes in general had already been on a steady decline in the US market. Because of this, GM decided to discontinue the Riviera and any other future variations of it. This eliminated the plans for the upmarket Aurora. After substantial financial trouble, and since development of the Antares was already underway, the brand had no choice but to re-engineer the Antares and turn it into a reasonable Aurora within a short period of time. Now, I would like to point out that whenever you look at a second generation Aurora, You're looking at a car that was supposed to have initially became the new Antares, so the overall dimensions are a lot smaller than the first generation. And I would also like to point out the fact that the first generation models had frameless doors, while the second generation did not. Okay, so now that we got all that out of the way, the end result was a new Aurora that retained the G-body design and also retained the 4-liter Northstar V8, made it to an automatic transmission. So while the second generation kept the 4-liter, it also debuted a 3.5-liter V6 variant of the engine, which cranked out 215 horsepower. This new V6 was the first ever used in the Aurora, although it only stuck around for the 2001 and 2002 model years. And yes, in case you are wondering, this is exactly the same dual overhead cam V6 that was introduced with the Intrigue. Known as the LX5, it was developed by the Premium Engine Group at General Motors. Therefore, it was referred to as the Premium V6 or the PV6 for short during its development stage. Being based on the L47 Aurora V8, which itself is based on the Northstar engine, the developers decided to nickname it the Short North. However, car enthusiasts on the other hand adopted the name Short Star. The whole idea behind a lower priced Aurora was the belief it could have helped boost Oldsmobile's steadily declining sales. The brand managed to move 53,000 Auroras in 2001. However, that number rapidly dropped to just 10,000 units by 2002. Production of the V6 came to a halt in summer of 2002. And once again, for 2003, the Aurora became a V8 only sedan. So what was the explanation for such a steep decline in sales? And how come the new updated model wasn't the showstopper that demanded attention like its predecessor? Well, 10 months after the second generation Aurora went on sale, General Motors announced plans to phase out Oldsmobile, which was its oldest division. Perhaps this had a lot to do with the sudden loss of interest. On top of that, there were mixed feelings about the new generation Aurora. Many mentioned that it now lacked the special feeling of the first generation model. Others mentioned the new design was no longer revolutionary, but more keeping the family resemblance with other cars in the lineup. For example, looking at the rear design of the second generation car, it sported a more conventional, ordinary look. The last Auroras ended production in spring 2003. In the end, the Aurora definitely brought some much needed attention to the Oldsmobile brand, but just one car, regardless of how progressive and robust it was, wasn't enough to keep the brand alive. Despite the demise of the brand and the Aurora itself, the Aurora still managed to prove that a daring design, innovative engineering, and avant-garde are enough to bring in younger buyers, even when all that comes with a lofty price tag. The Aurora was the pick for pace car of the 1997 Indianapolis 500, after serving as pace car for all Indy racing lead races in 1996 and 1997. A 650 horsepower version of the 4-liter V8 went on to win the 1997 Indy 500, marking the first time the same engine design had both paced and won at Indy. This year was also the first time since 1947 that a 4-door sedan was chosen to lead the race, not to mention the first front-wheel drive 4-door ever. Only 64 Auroras were built for use as pace cars and parade cars. Oldsmobile did not produce a replica of this car. But that's not all. The Aurora made a second appearance as a pace car. The 2001 Aurora was pace car of choice for the 84th running of the 2000 Indy 500, and marked the 10th time that an Oldsmobile paced the annual Indianapolis 500, greatest spectacle of racing. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Have you had the opportunity to drive one of these cars? There are still plenty of them around, so I'm sure you've spotted one or two on the road recently. And in my opinion, from a design standpoint, they still look great. Let's hear your thoughts in the comments. This is your host Rob, and until next time, thanks for tuning in to Antique Tags.